What are some specific skills or skill set that great leaders possess in order to lead teams in the best possible way?
Well, in the industrial age, which some of the thinking in our schools and universities is still prevalent today, it was all about IQ. It was all about your test scores, and the highest test scores got the best opportunities, and they were placed in the best positions. And if that worked in the industrial age, which I question whether it did or not, it certainly does not work in the information age. Today, more important than IQ and your ability to take tests and retain information is EQ, is your relational skills, your ability to work in a team, your ability to relate to people, your ability to listen well and to resolve conflicts quickly. So the kind of leadership skills that are going to get you promoted in your career path over the next 20, 30, 40 years are going to be EQ skills, relational skills, learning to understand people, learning to understand how the differences between individuals and their personality and their temperament and their gender and their backgrounds and experiences, to harmonize these people to work together in a team. Because if not, these strong-willed people will tend to clash. And what we don't want is clashing. We want people to celebrate the differences, appreciate the differences, and allow those differences to work together to create innovation and creativity. So relational skills, computer skills, language skills, these are the important skill sets in the information age. I'm speaking in English to undoubtedly a majority of Croatian students, right? And you guys already are demonstrating the fact. I mean, you're listening to me in English, so you're already multilingual, and you're in a program such as this, which tells me you're beginning already to understand the importance of this kind of education, which goes beyond and is quite different than traditional high school, college training, where it's all about IQ, right? It's all about, you learning information that you'll probably never use again in the rest of your life. Whereas this is more about practical wisdom and the application of principles that are going to shape the way you think and are going to shape your destiny as you move forward in your career.
So, I mean, you mentioned before that we're all different. We have different personality profiles. We act differently. We have different backgrounds. Why, from the perspective of leadership, why is it important to understand those personality profiles? What types are there in general? And, how can leaders or your future team leaders benefit from knowing that stuff?
So one of the very first leadership schools that I went to as a young airman, maybe 2 years or so in the Air Force, and it was basically a 1 week, 5-day leadership course. So they give you the right leadership at the right training at the time. It started with a week. Later on, a few years later, it was a month, and then the schools get longer. But the first one I went to was a week, and one of the principles they taught us in the very first week was the idea of the different personality profiles and how different people are innately, their innate personality differences. And it goes all the way back to the Greeks and Romans who understood these things, and hot blood and cold blood, and they didn't understand the biology, but they saw that there's different personality temperaments and that people are very different. And I listened to that, and I can remember as a young guy, 18, 19, I thought to myself, you know what, that is a bunch of nonsense. I don't believe that at all. People are far too complex for that kind of, And it was several years later, actually, after I became an officer. I was, I think, 28 years old, if I remember right. And someone came to me in a meeting after a staff meeting and that I was leading, and basically said something to me that changed my life. He says, you know what? He says, you are a monster. And I thought to myself, what in the world is this person saying and thinking, And I began to really, from that moment on, ponder what was it about me that caused this personality to see me that way? And I began to revisit some of these ideas of the personality. And I started taking these DISC tests and other tests once again, but this time with an open mind, with an open heart. And I began to realize that these profiles are very helpful. They're not all inclusive. They are not 100%, but they are one aspect of many that do provide very predictive insights as to how I am, how I think, how I react and respond in situations and in relationships, be it marriage or be it at work or be it friendships, and how others do. And so with that kind of a predictive model, that is a incredibly important EQ relational skill set. And I can basically ask somebody. I had dinner with a CEO and his wife. Lunch actually was coffee, and we were talking about this topic came up, and I said, you know what? I said, I can ask you two questions, and the way you answer those two questions, I can tell you an enormous amount about you, your leadership, your marriage, how you relate to each other, your strengths, your weaknesses, your team, how your team sees you. And they laughed. They said, that's a joke. And that was kind of like me reflecting back to my first leadership training course, right? I said, this is a joke. This doesn't work. And so I asked them two questions. Number one, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? And they answered the question I already kind of knew just by listening to them. And then a second question is, are you goal-oriented, task-oriented, or are you people-oriented? And they both answered those two questions. And I just, for the next 30 minutes, just began telling them about themselves, their marriages, their strengths, their weaknesses. And they just laughed and had a hilarious time because they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe how much insight I had concerning them. So you can see how important that kind of a predictive skill is as a follower, understanding others and yourself, and as well as becoming a leader, and you begin to celebrate these differences rather than seeing them as negative.
Could we go back to those two questions? Why is it so easy? Why can you predict all those things just by answering those two questions?
Because basically, if you have a person who is an extrovert and they're goal-oriented, they fall into, if you picture a profile, a 4-quadrant profile, right? So extrovert, introvert, task-oriented, goal-oriented, and those create 4 quadrants, and if you will, right? And those 4 quadrants define these 4 personalities. So a extrovert who is goal-oriented is going to have a very predictable set of strengths and weaknesses, limitations. They're going to be visionary. They're going to be goal-oriented. They're going to be decisive. But the weaknesses, the limitations, how they're perceived by others is that they can look like they are not confident but arrogant. They can seem not just decisive but to make decisions too quickly, knee-jerk kind of decisions, right, without thinking things through. They see things as too easy to be done, and others say, no, it's not that easy. And so there's great strengths and there's great limitations. So a D would be somebody I would want on a battlefield. If I'm fighting a battle, I'm going to want a commander who is that kind of a personality, can get the job done, right? Mission first. So if somebody is an extrovert and they are a people-oriented person, these are the life of the party. These are the people that are fun, that are engaging, because they're not worried about the goal, they're worried about the journey. And they have a very predictable set of strengths and limitations. And so as a leader, you have to be able to understand and discern these strengths and limitations so you can manage the strengths and manage the limitations, especially within a team setting. Most people fall in the introvert and people-oriented. They're steadies. They're phlegmatic is another word that's used for that quadrant. They're phlegmatic, easygoing, hardworking, stable. But their limitation is that they like security. They're very security-oriented. They don't like change, and they especially don't like change that they perceive to be quick or abrupt or without a purpose. Then you have your introverts who are goal-oriented. These are the analytical personalities. These guys are these are the people that I would put in jobs in finance, managing numbers, programming software. They're wonderful at that. But their limitation is that they tend to be cautious. They tend to be negative. They could be perceived to be negative. So these are very predictable quadrants, very predictable things that one can learn. And so when I really purposed myself at 28 to learn this, I started with myself and my marriage, and then I began to apply it to my relationships and friendships, and then eventually to my leadership. And it had a profound effect, I believe, on making me a more effective leader.